Are you the quantum mechanics?
Yes, we are the Quantum Mechanics. We're the paranormal podcast for the believers, the doubters, and everyone in between. Warm welcome to Damara, who's joined us as a Patreon.
Hello.
Thank you so much for that. If you'd like to help us with the podcast, please consider becoming a Patreon. You get the episode more or less a week early without ads. You get the exclusive Patreon episode, Ben and Peter's Extra Scoop. We have lots of stuff that we post in there, news, what we're working on.
And access to the Discord server, which is...
We've gone all Discord.
I know, it's it's an evolving beast, the Discord server, but it's coming along, and there will be extra material in there throughout this year.
So yeah, well worth joining Patreon, or actually when we do those surveys of people who join, most of the people join just to help support us. So we thank all our Patreons, new and old.
So speaking of which, one of the things that our patrons do help us with are the field trips, which are pretty, we've got quite a lot out of it this year. We've got some great stories, and I think it's worth following up. So the bakery, where it was arguably less eventful than the prison, turns out after we left, it all kicked off. I spoke to my contact there a couple of days ago. Unfortunately, she'd been poorly, and it had taken her this long to come round and talk to me. But she told me that a couple of days after we left, they had an unexpected flood. So if you listen to that episode, you will hear us in the proving room. And the proving room was like where a couple of the psychics that were with us were saying that they were feeling things. But it was quite calm. Turns out they had this flood. They've had to repair the floor in there, put new flooring in there. They can't find the source of the water.
I wish I hadn't turned that tap on.
The coffee machine downstairs in the customer area is unpredictable. It keeps turning itself on and off and won't be turned on sometimes.
Didn't Tim have something on the night about the coffee machine?
The coffee machine,
to remember.
It wouldn't turn on when we were there because she was trying to make us a coffee, and then Tim heard the coffee cup. Even though there wasn't a coffee cup, he heard one of those paper cups dropping to the ground. That turned out to be like a phantom noise, literally a phantom noise. And the room upstairs where the boy who was with us told us that he'd seen, you have to listen to the episode, he'd seen the head in the tumble dryer.
Yep.
They've now got access to that room, and there are mysterious noises and weird things around there. And it's become so bad that the baker that we interviewed, who we lost the interview for some either technical or unexplained reason, he's had to bring a religious person into the building to do more blessings because he has felt so intimidated by the presence.
When we interviewed him, he was like, yeah, when it all started kicking off there, it had freaked him out a bit, but he seemed very calm about it, almost like I'm living with it and it's fine, and so that changed. Wow, okay.
It's weird that she said it's particularly weird that our presence there seems to have made it all come alive. And she said, I don't know whether it's trying to make contact again or it's just being more mischievous.
She doesn't kind of hate us for doing it, does she?
Oh, no, not at all. No, I think she finds it interesting.
Okay.
So, yeah, it's worth listening to that episode with that follow-up. And I think I will be able to find out more as we go on. I will report back because she says it's like an ongoing thing. So it's interesting. It's
almost like the mix for a sourdough. We're going to go back for a second batch.
Yes. Did you know in Sweden there's a sourdough hotel where if you go on holiday you can leave your what do you call it? Your sourdough plant, your mix, your base, and they will look after it.
Oh,
I know.
That's so sweet.
Well, it is cute, isn't it?
Wow, so it all kicked off at the bakery. Because, the episode's brilliant. There's some really good stuff in there. But it was kind of us really going into the historical paranormal activity there. We had a few weird sensations, but nothing overly weird.
No. We didn't record any noises or anything particularly out of the ordinary. But it seems like there was something. All
kicks off 2 days after we left.
Yeah, after we leave. Yeah.
Well, that is a trickster spirit, isn't it?
It really is, and I think there's more not acceptance. I think there's more feeling on their side that this is a trickster, and
Right.
you know, as we said at the time, they believe that it might be jinn. So I don't know. It's
Wow.
interesting.
Wow.
It's time now, though, to go into this week's episode where we're looking up above.
If I said it's something to do with the sun, would I be getting warm?
Well, just have a listen to this.
That sounds like something off Star Trek, Ben.
Yeah.
Are you sure you're not going to get us a copyright strike for playing that?
No, that is the sound of the sun.
Oh,
That is what the sun sounds like. It was recorded, obviously, by NASA a few decades ago, like 3 decades ago, and it's kind of odd, isn't it?
yeah, really bizarre.
But the sun is much odder than you think.
That
So-
it sounds.
Than it sounds, yeah. We talk a lot about extraterrestrial, so things not from the Earth. Obviously, terrestrial, that was what that means, of course. But the sun has always been a big part. Of course, it's a big part in all of our lives.
Yeah.
And sometimes the things that happen around it are stranger than we could ever know. And the causes are currently unproven. I'm going to go into some of those cases. But I thought I would start because the reason that I got into this was I've been obsessed ever since it first came out in the press about the Dyson Sphere sighting. Do you remember this?
Yes, I do.
So, named after the physicist Freeman Dyson, who in 1960 had this idea that aliens might build a mega shell around a star to suck up all of the juice coming out of it, basically.
Yep.
It would be a way of powering an extraterrestrial civilization. And what's interesting about that is, of course, on Earth at the moment, we're coming into a situation where we've got very power-hungry pieces of technology, AI, electric cars, that sort of thing, and we're having to find ways of producing electricity. So he was kind of ahead of his time in thinking about that. But then in 2015, there was the star, it was called Tabby's star, named after the astronomer that found it. And some telescopes caught it dimming weirdly up to 22% of a dip rather
Wow,
than the
that's
1%
huge.
flicker that you'd expect from a planet
Wow.
that was passing by. So obviously that's how they detect how many planets are orbiting it,
Yeah.
because of the dimming.
So they thought that was some indication of something like a Dyson sphere,
Yeah.
going round or blocking it, collecting the energy. I seem to remember this story, yeah.
Yeah, that's right. It's hard to believe it was 10 years ago.
Wow.
And there was all sorts of people going, this proves it. It was a proven Dyson sphere, but unfortunately, it seems like it was more of a natural cause. And now scientists by 2018 had thought, actually, it is probably just cosmic debris. It's like a cloud dust, and it wasn't ET. Although there are some people saying, look, even dust couldn't make it dim that much.
Right.
As it turns out, at the moment, everyone's like, no, I don't think it is a Dyson sphere.
The theory that it might be, I don't know, some kind of cosmic cloud, I guess it depends how close to the sun it is. I was thinking, that's quite a scary thought, because I don't know what, if a cosmic cloud got in the way of our sun and it dimmed by 20%, that I imagine that would be devastating.
It would be devastating. Yeah. I suppose the thing about it is you don't know how far away the debris
Just
is
between
from the
there
star.
and the measurement.
Yeah. It's one of those things, a little bit like pulsars. When we first discovered pulsars, we thought they might be extraterrestrial because we never come across them before. But then it turns out, right, now we found 2 of them and 3 of them, and they've got predictable behavior. You can then use theoretical physics to go, that's probably what it is. And it turns out that is what it is. But then things start getting weird, because then I started thinking, I wonder if anyone has ever thought about like exploring the idea of Dyson spheres a little bit more. And then, of course, I bumped into have you come across Solar Warden?
No.
The secret space program. No. This isn't the crux of today's episode at all, but these are all just beautifully interesting things. So Solar Warden is the claims that there is a classified US space program operating advanced spacecraft capable of interstellar travel, like even leaving our solar system and exploring far off galaxies, very much Star Trek like. And that's because of Gary McKinnon. Do you remember that name? Yeah. He's the guy who claims to have hacked into US computers and allegedly found evidence of this secret space fleet. And he believes that these advanced spacecraft were capable of traveling to other planets and have they're allegedly powered by advanced propulsion systems, including zero-point energy. And the mission is to protect Earth from extraterrestrial threats. And so the reason it's called Solar Warden is to protect our solar system. Right. That's how it ties in with the sun. And obviously the proponents of it say, well, the reason it's kept hidden from the public is because we want the government wants to maintain control over that advanced technology, and probably also not warriors. But that's a very common.
Yeah, it does make you go, we need to protect our solar system.
Yeah, and of course Gary McKinnon was extradited, and a lot worse things happened to him than you would expect for someone who just hacked into a computer system. Yeah. And he stands by his what he says. It's also probably likely that he stumbled across papers that used code words that he didn't particularly understand. Not him particularly, but anybody wouldn't understand. So Solar Warden might be a completely different project.
Well, normally they don't name them to give you a clue, do they? They're normally a bit more random than that, aren't they?
Yes, I think they probably are. But it's just an alluring. Solar Warden is just a very alluring name. Although when you first think of it, you remember the Vitalite guy?
Yeah.
Just him dressed as a traffic warden. Yeah. That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, or I've got the Teletubbies baby in my head as well.
The Teletubbies baby, yes. I think she's married now.
That's weird, that.
I know. But to fully get into the weird things that happen around our sun, I just want to remind you that there is quite a lot of mythology around the sun that links together with some of the things that happen. So Ra, which is from Egyptian mythology, the supreme sun god of ancient Egypt, who was depicted as a man with the head of a falcon crowned with a solar disc. Probably you would know him from dressing up at primary school. Loads of us had to.
The best looking one. I don't mean as in, wow, he's hunky. I mean,
he's a hot god.
It was a great image, wasn't he, Ra?
He was. I preferred Anubis because it's a dog.
Right.
But if you actually came across either of them, it'd be quite terrifying.
Yeah.
But the main point about him is that he would travel across the sky in a solar barge during the day and through the underworld at night. Right. And obviously ancient aliens and ancient alien theorists, who basically are the people that appear on the program Ancient Aliens, say that perhaps Ra's solar barge could have been a spacecraft. So then we also have Inti, who was the Inca sun god, considered the ancestor of the Inca rulers. And the alien theorists again speculate that the golden representations might symbolise advanced technology or extraterrestrial visitors. So this god was honoured with a lot of gold things, and of course I think it's a bit of a reach, but there are various connections with space travel, like, for example, using gold to case glass visors to protect eyes from the sun. Gold is used a lot in the electronics in spacecraft, but I think it's much more likely that gold looks a bit like the sun.
I think that's more. And I'm sure you could just pick something and go, oh, well, that's got an association with space travel. It looks like he's got Velcro on.
Yeah. Yes, that's true. But like Ra, Helios from Greek mythology and Surya from Hindu mythology, they both have transport. So Helios drives a chariot across the sky each day, which you could say is a metaphor for the sun rising and setting.
That's what I was thinking.
But Helios's chariot could be also a metaphor for a UFO. And then the 7 horses that pull Surya across the sky could also be propulsion systems of a spacecraft. Now, I'm drawing... There's a reason I'm pointing this out. There's a reason I'm
with you,
pointing this
because
out.
I'm sitting there going, it makes much more sense to me that in ancient times there's a, well, where did it go and why does it come back? It seems a much more logical thing than, oh, no, it must have been observing some extraterrestrial activity. But, yeah, okay, I'll go with it.
Okay. Well, I thought that, okay, that is all just mythology and we know nothing can go close to the sun, don't we? I mean, the sun is so heavy and the gravitational field alone would make it very difficult, let alone the heat. But have you ever heard of Gandhi? Not Gandhi.
Not Gandhi. I've heard of Gandhi.
2 different words. He was a big deal in ancient China, about 400 BC.
No.
He was one of the first astronomers that we know of by name, and he was working under the Han dynasty. He is credited with spotting Jupiter's moons before Galileo, and using just his eyes and basically patience. And about this time, 400 years BC, he, in his records, mentions what he describes as a moon boat appearing every 12 years, a glowing thing in the sky that didn't act like a star or a planet.
Wow.
And it is always centered around the sun. He didn't leave a note saying, I saw aliens, but he did leave it in the records of the observatory. We can read about it now that he wrote this down. And nobody at the time thought that it was a big deal everyone just accepted, oh, right, you see this thing.
Did you say about every 12 years, or was it every 12 years?
He said he said it appeared every 12 years. He was very specific about the 12 years.
Which makes you think it might be some more I can't say the word.
Astronomical.
That's the one.
Astrological body.
Phenomena,
yeah.
because of its consistency.
That's
like
right.
a comet or an asteroid or something,
That's right. Yes, and I think that is probably what is more likely. But the way that he describes it as a moon boat, because he doesn't go into frustratingly. And I've tried to find more different translations. It always comes out as moon boat, and I think the reason is just a syntactical problem that there is no better word for it, because I think he's trying to describe
its move.
Yes, a move is exactly. But the reason I brought up all those sun gods is it's kind of similar.
Yeah.
And then you've got Christoph Schiener and the Burning Globe from 1623.
That sounds like a band.
It does, doesn't it?
Christoph Schiener and the Burning Globe live.
He lived in Germany, and he was a Jesuit priest and an astronomer, and he saw this in 1623. He was obsessed with sunspots. He's basically the guy that turned solar science into a thing at the time.
Okay.
And he's peering through an early telescope, sketching these sunspots, and if you Google any of the images of what he's drawing, they are very precise, and they're almost like, how can I put it? It's almost like he's drawing that little sort of tattoo type elements, because he's very, very intricate in the details that he puts on there. So he is not just like this amateur guy. He spent his old life doing this. And in his own words, he describes a burning globe detaching from a sunspot, streaking across the sun's face for 48 minutes. And he is obviously stumped. He writes in his notes that it's unlike any known phenomena. It's too fast for a flare, too deliberate for a glitch. Back then, his peers in the Jesuit order said, as you can imagine, it's a divine mystery, a divine illusion, basically. Other people thought, well, it's just an optical illusion. It's something that, because your eyes can play tricks on you, and that was, what they thought. And in 1623, telescopes were new, and of course, alien wasn't really a thing then. People weren't talking about it, no.
The shorthand for alien at that time would have been some kind of god, wouldn't it?
Yeah, one kind of god that he was talking about. But there's this history of the church and science, and nobody poo-pooed him or tried to say that he was wrong. They were just like stumped. And I think that's a little bit like the guy way before him there in China. He just didn't know what he was looking at. A little bit closer to current time, in the Rio de Janeiro Observatory in 1875, there's a guy called Louis Cruels, who's a Belgian-born, I would say, brainiac, who's mapping the stars and chasing eclipses. And between December 1875 and January 1876, his team logs something which can only be described as nuts. It's a vast array of bodies crossing the sun, some luminous, some dark. Crolls doesn't leave a personal diary entry, but the observation report at the observatory, which is published in local papers at the time, describes these dozens of objects, and they use similes like fireflies, black as coal, moving in no pattern that made sense in nature. They said it's an actual formation. Brazilian papers at the time speculated, meteor showers, unknown atmospheric effects. But most of the time, people couldn't, they were just like, oh, it's a thing. Now, some people in modern time have looked back and gone, oh, well, it's a fleet refueling. And this is kind of probably the first time people talk about refueling off the solar energy. But there's a lot of people who say telescope flaws, space dust. But I guess the reason that it's worth mentioning and being taken seriously is because he is a serious astronomer.
Dedicated to it.
Exactly.
So in modern times, there's no natural explanation apart from things like, should have cleaned his telescope or whatever. Is that there's nothing like, oh no, what that was some rare sunspots that happen now and again. There's nothing like that. No. So there are people who speculate like he was seeing something in the upper atmosphere. I read one report where there was somebody absolutely convinced that it was just birds flying in front of the telescope, but that doesn't make any sense either, because these were observed over a long period of time. I can't imagine it was birds. Yeah. But it was not repeated and it wasn't seen before, so it was a unique event. Right.
And that's why it stands out.
It's a bit of the wow signal of its time.
It was. But we've had some in modern times.
Right.
And this is where I was leading to.
Right.
Because obviously we can do a little bit better now than just... Can you imagine being an astronomer just with your bare eyes?
Just doesn't,
And even looking up at the sun, I mean... that must have really hurt. But we've now got NASA's Solar Observatory satellite, or they call it the SOHO, that was launched in 1995. And that gives us a look at the sun 24/7. And that's when really the weirdness ramps up. So let me take you to March the 11th, 2012, around 7:54 in the morning, UTC. At that time, they're observing a mid-sized prominence eruption, a fiery show, plasma twisting everywhere, sun's magnetic field. Those prominence eruptions, you're probably familiar with them. You've seen them on television. But what they weren't expecting was, in the images, a black, perfect circle, smooth, no edges fraying, with a tether. Appears like a rope 50,000 miles to the prominence's tip. It's static, it doesn't bob or drift like a comet or other piece of space sort of material would. Prominences are common, giant gas loops, which are held by magnetic forces, but this sphere is outside of that action. It appears to be latched on. It's almost like a big balloon, and it's not part of the flow.
From that description, because the first thing I thought of was like the description sounds a bit like a kite, but you're saying the bit that's attached is not moving in any way.
It's not moving,
It's more like a solid thing.
It is.
That's attached.
And
Wow.
it's 50,000 miles long.
Wow.
Of course, everybody at the time started going crazy. There was a forum thread I found on a site called Open Minds, which speculated, again, as you imagine, the tethered object, is it energy harvesting? And there's a well-known UFO sightings guy, Scott Waring, who was all over this. And he was the one that said, look, this is a UFO siphoning solar plasma, proof they use our star as fuel. And he posted some images where he was saying that this is, we're calling it a tether because, that's what it started to be called. He said like it's a hose or a conduit, and the sphere itself is 25 times the Earth size. Well, it's not quite 25 times. That is a bit loose with the maths. It's probably more like 15.
Still pretty big, though.
It's still pretty big. NASA, though, barely a peep. They stuck to the script. They said that image anomalies are often associated with coronal activities or processing errors. So they were saying, like, this is probably just a result of all of the material that is being processed, the light and the radiation coming into the instruments and then having to be interpreted by a computer. You're going to get these things happen.
The thing I was immediately thinking to counter that was almost a perfect circle and a perfect straight line seems a weird thing for an anomaly, but are they saying it's almost the computer will try and almost pareidolia-like try and create it into something like that?
Well, the most sophisticated explanation was that it's an optical illusion from overlapping plasma strands, and that the computer that is interpreting the images can't work that out and presents it like this.
I love that idea, though, that almost stars, everybody's sun, almost like intergalactic petrol stations.
Well, that's exactly what Scott Waring was saying. He says that all in the people in the past, because he's obviously aware of the sightings that I'd read out. He said this is the first time where we've got the smoking gun. The tether is the smoking gun. I'm not sure it is, but it is unsolved.
I wonder if interstellar travellers get range anxiety.
Well,
there's 15 light years. We're saying 13. We're not going to make it.
If that is what they're using to fuel their devices, then possibly. The latest from NASA is a 2020 paper. The Astrophysical Journal, where it models prominence cavities, which you could say this might be, but it doesn't match what we're seeing here with the perfect circle. So no one is basically saying they've solved it. It's basically you sort of nod at it, go must be natural, and walk away. Yeah. But I do think you can say it is unexplained. There are still people talking about it.
Wow.
But this is the one that really gets me. This is the one genuinely that made me sort of have to go and have a shower and think about it. In September 2017, around 1306 UTC, there's a lot of sun activity going on. And in the middle of the observation is what can only be described as a solid four-sided cube, perfectly square from our angle, no glow, no fuzz. It's dark against the white-hot tendrils of the sun, and it pops out like a silhouette. Some frames even show that it has depth. It's 3D. It can't be a flat glitch.
Right.
This observation of the sun, it was messy. There's blobs of plasma. There's magnetic loops everywhere. But this cube sits outside the flow. It's unmoved. It's like either parked or hovering. No tail, no disintegration. It's definitely not dust.
How big?
Right. Well, we'll come on to that because it's huge.
Right.
So that blew up, of course, on all the social media. Cube UFO by the sun, bigger than Earth. NASA's hiding this. That was a headline from an American newspaper.
I could see the tabloids going, the Borg have invaded.
Yeah. Well, yes, that's exactly what some people were saying.
It's a Borg cube.
Yeah. Some people at NASA said that it was a pixel error from a CME overload. So that is basically, if you overload your digital camera by shining a light into it, what you actually get is just a mess of noise. That's what they're saying this is. But that doesn't hold true. The skeptics of that particular opinion, and I would kind of agree with them, going that artifacts don't have depth to them.
Three-dimensional.
They don't appear to be three-dimensional. They don't fly. They don't move, and it just doesn't add up. Now, when people started talking about this as a mothership, there was a lot of speculation about how big it might be. And this is one of the things that nobody can quite agree on, because at that distance, and depending on like how far away from the sun you think this might be, remember that guy who the ring makers of Saturn?
Yeah, I was thinking about that.
He was describing spacecraft that were thousands of miles long.
Yeah.
Well, this would have to match that. It would be
Right.
bigger than the Earth by several magnitudes.
Wow, okay.
And I think that is the best way of describing it, because there's a load of people going, it's 50 times bigger than the Earth. There's no way of particularly knowing. It sort of maps out as definitely bigger than the Earth, smaller than the sun is probably the best way of putting it.
And when they're capturing this, is this almost like a live feed of the sun, or is it images that are taken at intervals?
It's a video of the sun, but it's not quite like the space station where we have that live feed on YouTube. The image that comes through needs to be processed for us to be able to understand what we're looking at. But it's not like this has been... It wasn't in a single frame. That's the point of it. It crossed several frames.
But is there any... I don't know, I'm thinking... Yeah, it was there for a minute and then it disappeared. Is there any kind of context like that?
Yeah, it is there for a small amount of time and then disappears.
Right, so it's a fleeting thing.
It's a fleeting thing. Yes, it's a fleeting thing. But the point about it is square, and nature hates squares. So you remember the Oumuamua?
Yeah.
Yes, I said that right. That sort of cigar shape, but it was still irregular, and it was just like basically a long piece of rock.
Yeah.
This, it just doesn't have that. It has precise corners. As you say, a Borg cube is the perfect way of looking at it.
Because I know there's been that thing on Mars recently, that Mars photo. But again, they've almost had to draw the lines on to make it a perfect square, haven't they? Or a bit of artistic license. But this sounds like, no, it's just a square or a cube, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, however it's been generated.
Yeah, that's right, yeah. To sort of round that one off.
You square in the circle there.
I'm squaring the circle. And they have got this explanation. So they say an intense solar light can bloom the camera's sensor, creating square or blocky shapes when pixels overload. Then a cosmic ray hits it, and high energy particles zapping the detector, you get this perfect dark cube against a bright coronal mass ejection. And similar blocky glitches show up in older SOHO data. There's a 2003 triangle, which is debunked as sensor noise.
Right.
The cube's static position fits this, but because artifacts don't move with the plasma. But unfortunately, the cube is too crisp. Blooming usually gives blurred edges on the camera.
Right.
What you get in that triangle piece, yeah, it's absolutely a triangle, but it is much blurrier than this.
Dave, stop doing your Rubik's Cube in front of the camera.
And this is much bigger than that triangle. It's scaled next to the sun. It's not a tiny pixel smear. It would have to be across a number of different pixels. Right. And when you start explaining it with a cosmic ray hitting, the chances of a cosmic ray hitting just across that number of pixels to create that specific square, it is really, really difficult. But of course, NASA stands strong. No, it's an instrument artifact, not a physical object. No one has funded a deep dive. The cube is a one-off. It's not a research goldmine.
I always think with these things, it's like the photographs. You know, when all the ones that are on Mars of the face and all that kind of stuff, and there's a Sasquatch on Mars, those ones. You know, I always think, well, if you took aerial photos of deserted places on Earth, you would find similar type patterns. It's making me think in this case, surely there would be images that are similar to that. You know, if that's the NASA defense, it's like, this happens regularly here are 20 images that are not quite perfectly square, but it's just the random nature of it. We get a perfect square every now and again, but it just seems like they throw out the line without going into that. Maybe nobody's gone through it, but you know what I'm saying? It's like you could easily go, look, we've got 25 of these that are not perfect squares, but it's a similar effect.
Well, they sort of did that with the triangle, but I think what is so fascinating about this is the lack of willingness to talk about it and just kind of the answer is only a theoretical answer, and it's a theoretical. Obviously, it's the instruments themselves. Now, I don't mind that because that is probably what you would expect. It is much more likely that it's that than we've got a huge interstellar mining craft going past the sun.
I wonder if there's a bit of NASA worrying they're going to create a storm, to use the phrase, a bit like the bisons on the moon. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah, the bisons on the moon. Yeah, that's one of my favourites. Yeah.
Yeah, but you know what I mean? It's like if you even slightly say, yeah, we don't know what it is, everything goes nuts, right?
Yeah, totally. And, like, there are other things that have happened up there. So in 2023, the Soho catches like a winged silhouette. It's actually dubbed the Solar Angel, and people went mad around that. It's faint, it's fleeting, it does look like a figure with outstretched wings. NASA says obviously it's nothing. I think it is pareidolia.
Yeah.
But it looks a little bit, I don't know, like a traditional image of an angel. But I do think that is more pareidolia, and that I can accept. That feels very much more like the sort of artifact that you would collect on a camera.
Yeah, because it's flowing different patterns. It's not a geometric shape.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. But we've got to be really careful that we don't want to. We're not inventing something that isn't there, because that does as much damage to UFO research as anything else.
Yeah.
But there's so many people. I went through lots and lots of different archives to see what people were saying, and I found a tweet from Astro Fact Check from October 17, and that account was taking part in a conversation about the cube, and it says, "Damn, this is a weird one," and that sort of really comes through with all of the conversation around there. Much less dismissive from scientific accounts, much more like, that is probably worth investigating.
I'm going to throw another one out there. Could be a kind of pixelated image, but not from the camera or the telescope, from our simulation.
Well, how funny you should say that, because somebody did suggest that might be what it is. Yes.
Right.
So what you're saying, I think, agrees with that person. It's basically like the rendering of a computer game, just occasionally goes off.
Well, it's reminded me when we did the... I can't remember the name of the paper, but I think it was about the Fermi paradox, actually, where someone had said, or maybe... I can't remember the name of the person who did it, but there was this theory that we can't travel faster than the speed of light because the computer has to create the environment that we're going into. It would sit in that
It's the processing speed.
Yeah, processing speed. Yes, that's the speed of light, because they can't generate the environment quicker. That's a pixel glitch.
Yeah. Totally.
This square or cube is a pixel glitch in the simulation rather than in the equipment we're using.
I think that's a really fair way of looking at it. And there have been lots and lots of different sightings of weird things around the sun. A lot of them, there's no point going through them all, because a lot of them are kind of less convincing than those. They're more often picked up by folk who go, look, NASA's hiding something. But those two, when I look through it, are genuinely unexplained. There are still equal number of proponents on both sides. And I think if you say, you got to go with NASA because they know what the instruments look like, fine. But if you can't explain exactly why it appears to be a 3D square, and they can't explain that, they just say it's just how it appears.
Well, it's quite handy just for anything you can't explain. Say, it must be a technology glitch then.
That's right. Yeah, it is. But at the same time, there is a sort of a tale from history that sort of says we have to be careful. This is probably a well-known tale, but I'm going to revive it here because I think it bears telling. Because you know that in 1899, Nikola Tesla thought that he was picking up signals. He's in Colorado Springs tinkering with this massive radio receiver, and he picks up these rhythmic beeps from space. And he says in this interview in Collier's Weekly, I believe that they're signals from an intelligent source, Mars perhaps. And he's roundly mocked. Somebody even says Tesla's gone nuts. Where have we heard that? Anyway, but he doubles down, hinting at these cosmic messages. And, of course, people today who think that the Black Knight satellite might be real say, well, he was picking up something, and every explanation that has been put forward for what he was getting, which is either Earth-based noises that we weren't aware of, or things from our solar system or outside the solar system, like perhaps pulsars that he was picking up. That has been they've poo-pooed that. And then if you fast forward to 1954, this whole Black Knight satellite thing kicks off. There's a guy called Donald Kehoe, who's a UFO writer, ex-Marine, and he pushes this in his Flying Saucers Are Real. In 1954, he tells papers like the San Francisco Examiner that the Air Force found 2 satellites orbiting Earth and no one's launched anything yet. The Pentagon deny it, but the Time magazine runs with it. Mystery objects detected. This goes on and on and on until we get to 1998, when there's this image of what appears to be something orbiting the Earth, a Black Knight satellite caught red-handed. You'll be familiar with this image, I think, something peculiar and black, long in shape, sort of hovering above a glowing Earth. But NASA say, look, it's a thermal blanket lost during a mission. And there's proof of that, there's absolute proof of that. But there are too many people saying, look, it's it's too structured to be that. This links back to a 13,000-year-old probe. And so we get all of these things adding up together to be this myth of the black satellite, which unfortunately I would love it to be a black satellite, but it isn't. It's
a real I want to believe, isn't it? That's kind of what was reminding me of that ancient astronomer who saw this thing every 12 years. It's so easy to go, that's it, proof of aliens. And then you're just like, well, yeah, that's why I picked up on, well, if it's coming back at a regular time, then that does suggest something a bit more natural at play rather than artificial. But it's just so scintillating to jump to it's aliens.
Of course it is. It's much sexier to say that it's aliens. But you see, what happens is, I found an interesting conversation happening around. There's a guy called Jose Luis Corradrio, who's a futurist and engineer, a MIT trained engineer, I should say. And he was talking in 2023 about the Black Knight satellite, and he was speculating, sort of, unfortunately, in the same sentence where he's talking about perhaps there are perhaps advanced alien probes monitoring Earth, and he said there are historical anomalies like Tesla's signals. He's not a Black Knight proponent, really. He's just saying weird stuff does happen, and he said, I think there's something a bit more weird about Tesla's signals. And people pile on that and go, oh, well, this guy thinks that the Black Knight satellite is real. He didn't really say that. He just said it's worth keeping an open mind on these things. And then when I look at a conversation with a similar kind of level guy, a guy called Duncan Lunnan, who's an astronomer, in 1973, he was looking at long delayed radio echoes that are called LDEs from the 1920s, basically things that are coming back to us from space. And he suggested that some of the signals that he was getting might be from an alien probe. And when he was kind of pushed upon it, he said, well, some of this stuff does seem to be coming back from a place in the sky that he calls Epsilon Bootis, based on star positions 13,000 years ago. It's basically a point in the sky, if you will. Epsilon
Bootis sounds like a Funkadelic record.
Yeah, I don't think I'm saying it right because there's an accent over the second but Bootis. And he sort of starts then speculating that, okay, so I might be getting some LDEs from planet Earth, but also I might be getting something from somewhere else. And so this gets cited in Black Knight discussions. And in recent years, he's sort of clarified that he doesn't explicitly tie this to Black Knight or claim any of it's real, just that the signals are odd and worth exploring. And this sort of, he describes it as cautious openness. And so he said, in his words, he said, I'm not shouting alien satellite from the rooftops, although some would say that I was. And he really wasn't. But I think the reason I'm mentioning these people is that as soon as they start saying, well, look, there is something anomalous here. I haven't worked out what it is, or what it was that I was receiving. And they sort of used Tesla as a starting point because Tesla had something similar. And people go, oh, well, you must just be mistaken. Yeah. But I don't think they are mistaken. There is something other. And it's either, I think it's most likely that they just don't know what it is they're listening to. And it's not like, we just have to be open-minded about what it is.
And if we use the tagline of our podcast, what you're describing there with what this guy's saying is something in between. But he's kind of losing on both ends, isn't he? Because the skeptics are going, you're just getting it all wrong. It's a natural thing, or you're mistaken. And then the believers are going, it's a satellite that's orbiting Earth, that's alien thing. That's what you picked up. And he's in the middle going, no, I just found something weird.
I just found something weird, exactly. And I think that that is all applicable to these sightings around the sun, in that the people have found something weird, and they're looking for an explanation for it. And if you start going down a route which is a little bit off the beaten track, then there really probably isn't very much you can do about that, because say NASA said, okay, that is a big black massive sphere that we found there. What do you want us to do about it? Mm-hmm. Then again, the conversation doesn't go anywhere particularly, other than, that's probably what it looks like. But it's more likely that it's one of our sensors playing up.
What I want to do about it is put a fuel tax on for when they visit our sun.
Well, I mean, who owns the sun?
Rupert Murdoch, isn't
it? Very good. Yes, thank you. And as with most of those things, probably, he's often quoted, but Nick Pope was interviewed about the Black Knight satellite, and he brought up a very interesting point about, he said that there were sightings of dark objects in the sky in the 1950s that appeared to be orbiting the Earth. But his point was they just appeared to be, and we're not sure. And of course, when he's pushed upon a 13,000-year-old alien craft, he's like, I'm not going to rule it out, but I think it's most unlikely. And I think that's where we get to with this. I think that idea of, I'm not going to rule it out, but it's most unlikely is there. But I will leave you with the thought that there might not be a solar angel out there, and there might not be a cube craft, but that cube craft is still a messy argument. It is definitely not solved, and you can take either which way you want to look at it and decide for yourself. But I find that truly extraordinary. And the fact that our friends in the past were seeing weird stuff across the sun, I think it's interesting. And when you tie in the ancient religions that have a special regard for the sun and even worship sun deities, and I know there's many proven theological reasons why you would. I think that that idea of the sun coming up in the morning and where does it go to at night, and needing to pray to a sun god is much more likely. And a chariot chasing it across the sun, well, of course, that's what your deity would do. Sorry, across the sky, that is what your deity would do.
Yeah, it's just a poetic way of describing the process, really.
Yeah. But I really like all of this stuff, and I really hope that we get to understanding whether there really are alien megastructures out there, and whether any of these things could be considered a smoking gun. Because right now they can't, but I wish they were.
The other thing that is really sticking with me is I'm really glad you went for the examples you did, rather than, there's an angel in the sky stuff. Not because partly because I find it a more credible thing, but also because all the way through it, I was just thinking of Stanley Kubrick's 2001: A Space Odyssey. That imagery of, you know, a huge cube or a perfect circle on a tether. You know, it's so 2001: A Space Odyssey, isn't it?
It is.
It really is amazing. Yeah, amazing imagery in my mind.
I wanted to avoid the more obvious ones. I mean, the most obvious sort of sun, I guess, anomaly would be the Miracle of the Sun in Portugal, which is 1917. Miracle of Fatima, it's also known as, when the sun was described to dance or zigzag through the sky, advance towards the earth, emit multicoloured light, all of that sort of thing. And that, you know, it's well reported in the newspapers. There was a religious encounter there. There's photographs taken of the people staring up and looking at this thing. And I don't know what to make of that. I think that is probably either mass hallucination or perhaps some sort of alien encounter. I'm not really sure that ties in exactly to the sun. I think that is much more of a that is what has been blamed for. You know, it's called the Miracle of the Sun.
Could be a bad batch of sherry.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. But it's sort of, because it is so tied into Catholic Church, even the Pope who approves these apparitions. Right. There's so much noise in that story. Yeah, it's just worth it as a beautiful story.
That's amazing, Ben.
I like those things where it seems so impossible that there might be something in it, like that ring makers of Saturn. Although it's almost a preposterous book, it is so tied in with actual science and the credibility of the guy who wrote it.
Yeah.
If you don't know about it, we've done an episode on it, basically arguing that there are spaceships hiding in the rings of Saturn and they made them. That I think your brain has a hard time, you know, pulling it apart and going, well, like, how can you be so clever and have achieved so much in your life when you talk about what you know about the universe and you know, as a scientist, and at the same time believe this about spacecraft? So it lends it some credibility. And here, the same credibility is lent by observers who say, but NASA, it doesn't all stack up. And I think that's all we've got at the moment is NASA, this doesn't all stack up.
Yeah.
But in my heart, I would really like Solar Warden to be real, and I would like there to be a barge floating across the sun visible in ancient China. That would be brilliant.
I love that idea of giant spaceships queuing up at our sun's petrol station to have a bit of a refuel, and they're on their way. Easing their range anxiety of their interstellar travel. The
range anxiety. I mean, I don't know what those spacecraft do, but I can imagine it's probably quite a few miles to the gallon.
You've got to think light speed's got to choke up the miles. That's like being in sport, isn't it?
Yeah. But it might not be fuel. It might be something.
Yeah.
It might be something else they want it for. Or they might just be observing this star. I mean, our star, it's important to us, but it's pretty small in terms of...
It's just that tether thing maybe got it into my mind.
Yeah.
That's the bit. Maybe they've just been cold in deep space and they're just warming up a bit.
This is one of the things that I discovered while I was looking into this, because I knew our star was small, but you know, the largest star that we know of is 1 billion times bigger than the sun.
Billion.
Wow. 1 billion times bigger than the sun. Okay. That is almost unimaginable size, isn't it?
Right. Yeah, it is incredible.
That is extraordinary. 1 billion times bigger than the sun.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for that. Really good research. Really well told. I'm going to be dreaming about those geometric shapes in the sun tonight. And
hope 7 of 9 doesn't come and get you.
Yeah. Well, funny you say that. Next week.
Yes.
I'll be a bit cryptic. We're going to do some erotic experimentation, Ben.
Erotic experimentation?
I'm going to just leave you with that thought.
Okay. Do I need to wear anything special?
No, you're fine.
Okay.
You're fine just the way you are.
Who sang that?
I love you just the way you are. Don't know.
No. Oh, we'll Google it afterwards.
Yeah, cool. All right, well, we will come and join us on Patreon now if you want more chat about this, and and we'll probably talk a little bit more about the bakery as well. So come to patreon.com/TQM pod and become a Patreon and come and have a listen.
See you soon. Cue the music.
Bye.
Are you the quantum mechanics?